Today's video is going to be about something known as complex post-traumatic stress disorder or complex trauma. Complex trauma is something that people can end up having if they've been exposed to multiple different types of trauma in a prolonged period of time. Usually this is something that comes from child abuse. When a child is really young and they grow up in an environment that isn't healthy and their parents aren't able to give them unconditional love and they're quite critical, they're quite abusive. It could just be emotional and psychological. It doesn't have to be physical and sexual. Of course, if it is physical and sexual, then this worsens the symptoms of the trauma. However, the emotional side of things is really quite severe in the fact that when a child is young and their brain is still developing, it actually causes damage to the brain. If a child is constantly told that they are stupid, if a child is constantly told that they're not good enough, and that is the message that they hear, every day, every second day, or for at least 5, 6, 7 years of their early life, this will then be a belief that they hold about themselves until they're older, until they become an adult. What results from that is that as an adult they end up having emotional flashbacks. Emotional flashbacks are quite severe regressions to the original trauma, to the original memory that is stored in the brain of when the child was being belittled or criticized by their parents. So yeah, it's quite a serious thing, and it affects people when it comes to relationships, and these people end up having emotional dysregulation. They're not able to regulate their emotions. They might overreact. They might sort of get really aggressive or really upset. This might last for days. It's not an easy thing to sort of shake off. Emotional flashbacks can cause helplessness, hopelessness, fear, anxiety, despair, depression. It is not a very good place to be in. If you experience emotional flashbacks, then I'll give you a list of tools that you can use to make it a little bit easier for yourself. And over time, if you keep doing this, then the intensity of these flashbacks will lessen. One of the most destructive forces behind an emotional flashback is usually the fact that people have internalized this negative critic. Now, this negative critic is usually the voice of their parents or whoever abused them as a child. And this inner critic is very, very strong, and it stays within the brain. The brain remembers. So any slight criticism that might occur in the present life of this person might trigger them into having a flashback to the earlier stage in their life where a certain thing was said to them that was really hurtful or undermining or abusive. So after we've been triggered and then we react, the key to dealing with an emotional flashback is to actually identify that we are having an emotional flashback. You then have to try and manage that flashback. So that takes us to the next step, and the most important step of managing the symptoms that occur. If you're not able to identify in that moment that what you're reacting to is in the past rather than in the present, then the feelings that you're having are going to escalate. When you realize you're having a flashback and you remove yourself and you go to maybe a quiet room in the house, sit somewhere calmly, take a few deep breaths, and if you can, talk to yourself in a reassuring and a nurturing way. Tell yourself that you will look after yourself. Tell yourself you're okay now. You're really upset because it hurts really bad, and it hurts really bad because you were hurt really bad as a child. You are not that child anymore, but you can still talk to yourself as if you were still that child. You can tell yourself it's okay, I'll protect you. Also remind yourself that you are able to leave any uncomfortable situation that you're in if you feel overwhelmed. You have the power to do that now. You're not a child that's at home with their parents. You're not a child that doesn't have the ability to run away, and you do. A lot of children do run away, but As an adult, you have more power. So you are in control of everything, and you can have healthy boundaries and remove yourself from situations that are not right. If you feel like crying, then do so. When you're having an emotional flashback, it's quite an intense experience, and it brings back a lot of these traumatizing feelings that you had as a child. So allow yourself to cry and tell yourself it's okay. It was really hurtful back then, wasn't it? There was nobody there to protect you. Just talk to yourself as you would talk to a small 5-year-old child. One thing I would say that's quite important is when you're having a flashback, try and notice the triggers. So try and notice, when it happens over 3 or 4 times, then you can start noticing a pattern. So you might notice that, okay, I'm reacting really badly whenever my partner says something specific to me, or whenever he has a certain tone of voice. So once you identify the triggers, you can then work on these by talking to yourself in a soothing way, or by talking to a therapist and working on your healing in therapy. Because having an abusive childhood means that you will need support in therapy, and you'll have to work on slowly grieving the lost childhood, or the childhood that caused you so much pain, and this will help you heal over time. I really believe that being self-compassionate is one of the most important things in healing yourself, and healing that child within, that child that was hurt so badly when you were so much more vulnerable. Don't be your parent. Don't continue to abuse yourself. Thank you very much, Guy. That's the end of the video. I really hope that it's helped you in some way. Please let me know if it has. I hope you have a great day, and see you soon.